Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance is the actual grant holder for this project. And we were awarded this back in 2020, so Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance, our partner, is the grant holder, and then we are working with Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance on the implementation and boots on the ground portion of it. So this project initially was looking at three primary practices that we wanted to see more of in the watershed, and that was no-till farming, cover crops, and then low disturbance manure applications. And we felt those were three critical practices that, if introduced into the watershed, could really help reduce sediment and phosphorus runoff that's impacting not only Pipe Creek but ultimately Lake Winnebago. So that's kind of the background on the project. I'm here with Justin from Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance, and then we have Dave Simon that's going to talk a little bit more about the practices that he's done. Through this project, certainly we've seen things grow, which has been fantastic. There's a lot of participation and interest from other farmers in the watershed on these practices, and we're hoping that we can talk a little bit more about that and promote more of the practices. And part of this project is really about everybody learning together, and certainly there were some unanswered questions as we kind of went into this project, and we knew that. But that's all part of the learning curve, and that was really what the project was all about, was having three farmers that were excited about doing these practices, learning from them, and then sharing both the good and the bad, so that it really helps other farmers shorten that learning curve if they're going to be introducing these practices onto their own farm. Certainly each farm is different with their equipment and their rotations and what they're growing, and that's critical with the adoption of these practices. So we really wanted to just try and help that learning curve along, so that they could see that I did this, I tried this, it didn't work, so I did this and it worked a lot better, kind of thing. So all part of that learning curve. So I don't know if there's anything more that you want to add, Justin, before we hand it off to Dave.
As Paul mentioned, my name is Justin Lurkey. I'm the Basin Ag Coordinator for Fox Wolf. We've kind of been excited to work down in this area. I think part of it was just trying to figure out what works, what didn't work, and the challenges that we'd run into, and then be able to identify those challenges and try to work with the farms in the area to try to figure out how do we overcome some of those challenges. It's an area that, while this program is kind of wrapping up, it's kind of the start of some additional funding and resources that we have coming and that will be available to the area. So if you do have questions in some of these practices, either talk to Paul or myself, and we can kind of explain what we do have coming up for this next year. So you'll hear a lot of stuff when it comes to Fox Wolf about Climate Smart. So we do have a fairly large grant that we're part of, where we're starting to explore what does a Climate Smart commodity look like, and what type of criteria has to go into that area. So we're kind of looking at and evaluating what does a Climate Smart farmer look like, and how do we kind of reward that behavior. So that's kind of what's next on the horizon for us. With that said, I think we kind of want to just, Paul, maybe give the group an overview, because I think sometimes it's good to understand. We're always looking at water quality from a big picture, right? Like today we're out talking on the farm, but is there, other work that Fond du Lac County is doing that we maybe want to just highlight, so people kind of get a little bit bigger appreciation for, it's not just all on the backs of farmers to pick up this water quality standpoint.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. As a land conservation department, just to kind of specifically talk about just Pipe Creek for just a second, this project, in what I call a project area, this watershed effort that we're kind of currently in, started back in late 2014, and it was started as a meeting that was down at Columbia Park, down at the end of the road down here by the lake. Lakeshore homeowners, I had Chad Tash and Mike Tash were there at the meeting, and we were just talking about some of the issues that Lakeshore homeowners were experiencing during some of the heavy rains that were coming back at that time and still continue to get, if not worse. And so we had commitment from Chad and Mike to look at different practices in the watershed. So we didn't have any specific funding for what we were doing. We were just taking the funding that we had and we're focusing it in the watershed as much as we possibly could. We didn't have any additional staff to do that, but we were focusing staff effort as much as we could into the watershed, because that's really what helps change with the participation of the farmers, what the introduction of technical staff and funding helps the adoption of conservation practices. So while we work county-wide, and there's a considerable, Fond du Lac County is not a small county by any means, we put as much effort into this watershed as we could with the participation that we had to try and adopt more conservation practices to reduce the soil erosion and runoff that we were seeing. So that started in 2014. Like I said, we didn't have any specific funding. One of the funding sources that we were really missing in the watershed initially is we had funding for structural practices. So we were really efficient at building waterways and water and sediment control basins that were helping to correct some of the concentrated flow areas that we had. But we were really missing what we call cropping practice funding, which is the practices like Dave and Chad are doing now, which is no-till and cover crops and other ones that come from a different funding source. So we applied for a grant from the Great Lakes Commission, the GLC, and they provided the funding that we were missing to do more adoption of cover crops, no-till, and harvestable buffers through that effort. And that was, again, another 2 or 3 year project that we worked through. And then once that project was kind of finished was when the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding that we are receiving from Fox Wolf came along. So it's been a progression with the watershed. We are focusing effort as much in a watershed because the more practices you can do in a watershed, the more results you'll show. So in the past, as a department, we didn't have a specific watershed project that we were necessarily working on. We were doing good projects all over the county. And all those good projects are still awesome. But when you focus your efforts, you can really show a change in water quality over time in a watershed. And that can't really be shown if you're doing projects. Even though they're good, you don't see the results necessarily of those throughout the entire county. So this watershed developed a 9 key element plan, which was approved by the EPA. So the Land Conservation Department developed that plan. It was approved by EPA, and it basically spells out some of the issues that we were seeing in the watershed, how big they are, and then some of the practices that can be done to try and reduce them. That 9 key element plan, again, doesn't come with any specific funding, but it helps you achieve funding because you have a plan that shows what they are, and more people are willing to provide you funding if you actually have a plan that spells that out. So that's kind of what led us to the GLRI grant that we have with Fox Wolf, is that we couldn't have achieved the GLRI funding that we have for Chad and Dave right now if it wouldn't have been for that 9 key element plan. That ink on that plan was barely even dry before we were applying for the GLRI project funding, and we still continue to use it for DNR funding and other sources. So that kind of is our long-range picture for here. But in a broader picture, we're working to reduce sediment and phosphorus reaching Lake Winnebago throughout the entire county. About half of the county just about drains to Lake Winnebago. So while we're working in Pipe Creek Watershed and we're here today, we're continuing efforts in other parts of the county that also drains to Lake Winnebago. So we have a similar project like this in El Dorado Marsh that we're upstarting. So we've got a farmer doing similar practices on the west side of the lake, just like we're seeing on the east side of the lake with Chad and Dave and other farmers that are participating. And then we also have portions of other drainage systems in our county that drain completely different directions. So we have a similar project that we're working on in the Milwaukee River watershed and also in the Rock River watershed and also Green Lake. So we do have definitely some priority areas in the county that we're trying to focus efforts. But again, the more we can focus on a specific watershed, the more impact you're going to be able to show. And that's what we're hoping to show here in the Pipe Creek watershed. So in Pipe Creek, not only do we have the GLRI grant with Chad and Dave, but we applied for a large-scale targeted runoff management grant from the DNR, and that allowed us to do over a mile's worth of improvements along Pipe Creek to do stream bank projects. So that project just finished up this last summer. In conjunction with that, Bruce, that's here today, put in a nice waterway that goes through one of his fields and ultimately to Lake Winnebago. And then we're also planning to do additional stream bank work from the west side of Highway 151 virtually down to the lake. So almost all of Pipe Creek through time will have had a complete stream restoration project. And the one that we're planning to do next year is using funding that we got from the county through the federal funding that we got through the county as part of the COVID relief. So I'm very excited and pleased that we have not only the support of the farmers here, but we also have the support of Fond du Lac County and the efforts and the work that we do. And a lot of it can't be done without the staff that are here. So I have Amber Cannon, who's here, that is one of our technicians in the office that's designing a lot of this stuff. Vincent Dockery is here, and he's been providing some technical assistance, but he's also working with the farmers to do practices that are also helping to reduce runoff. So some of the big picture things that we're looking at doing are more harvestable buffers, and we'll talk a little bit more about those today from what Dave is doing, but we have other farmers that are looking to either re-up or add more acres to those. And we're looking at a lot more wetland restorations in the watershed as well to help kind of achieve more retention of water in the watershed. So I think that kind of covers everything there.
One thing I will just say, Paul talked about the 9 key element plan for Pipe Creek. The average farmer looks at that report and really he looks at it and goes, well, what does this mean, right? And I think one of the questions that we got constantly asked by the farms was, how much conservation is enough? And so one of the things as part of this program was to develop a farm progress report where we could take the numbers that came out of the 9 key element plan and apply it so that the farm itself could look at and identify how much conservation was enough. Were they doing what they needed to do to be able to meet water quality standards? And then more importantly, be able to pick their own adventure, right? Like we wanted the farmers to be the ones leading this crusade and being able to kind of not have something dictated to them. We wanted them at the table to try to figure out how do we get here? And I think maybe just at that level, Dave, I think you've done a good job, as we went through that farm progress report to kind of show your farm was doing a pretty good job of keeping sediment and nutrients in the fields and out of our waterways. So I want to just say thanks for taking that step. But I just would love to kind of get your feedback of that process and kind of what you thought of going through it.
It was a great way for us to start incorporating manure back into our project. We had a really hard time taking manure because it always seemed to kill the cover crops. Now it seems like with the summer applications and less gallons, seems to be a lot better. It's doing a phenomenal job. If you look at the cover crops, everything that's growing here, I have specific dates of when we planted things and the amounts of rain that we get. The timeliness of the cover crop, the rains we get, it's working here, working great.
I think kind of just to kind of kick us off here, I know one of the practices that we kind of just wanted to hit on was these harvestable buffers. Where are you looking at putting them in? Where have you put them in here? And kind of go from there.
The harvestable buffers are so important because where all the nutrients from the fields run to are the waterways. So when we put them into a harvestable buffer, at least the nutrients that we have kind of eroding into there, we can take them back out by harvesting the hay or harvesting the grass or whatever is growing there. It seems to be working great. We're going into our second project with it. We can always leave waterways, but it always seems like it gets a little extra boost that the waterways wash out. Now when you got everything covered with a harvestable buffer, it doesn't get that chance. And now that we've had it, we've repaired some of our soils, that now what we're taking out, we aren't losing them anymore. It seems like it's just like a little stepping stone to get us into the next area. Yes, we could probably take this one as a harvestable buffer. They're usually anywhere between 75 and 150 feet wide. This is actually CRP. It's 35 feet, about what we have here. If you go up the lane, then there's another spot where we went 150 feet out. It just seems like when you go further away, it catches all of the little tracks of water that go in. So if we can get those areas repaired, I think in 5 years we'll be able to farm them, and it should stay where they belong.
So as far as harvestable buffers and program options that are available to farmers, Dave's kind of got two of our programs for establishing buffers happening on his farm. One of the programs that's popular is the CREP program, and that's very similar to CRP, like Dave mentioned. It focuses on what we call riparian areas. It can be a permanent easement if you'd like it. I think we only have one of those in our county, but the other option is like a 15-year agreement. And that's for establishing buffers along riparian areas. It's a joint program between USDA and the state of Wisconsin, and the local county land conservation department administers that program for the state. So it's a great option for farmers to establish buffers along riparian areas. They're 15-year agreements. They get cost sharing to establish the buffer, and then through the CRP side of the program, they get rental payments also for establishing it. So that's a great option. We've got a lot of participation in that in our county. The other option that's been available kind of intermittently because it depends on funding from the county, but the other option that's been available is through the county's harvestable buffer program. Our program is what we call harvestable, where the CREP program is not harvestable. You can maintain it, and there's maintenance options, but you can't regularly harvest it. What we were really interested in is just getting the establishment of the grasses and the buffers. So it's more of it has more of a water quality slant to our side of the program, but allows farmers to go in and maintain the buffer. Our program typically is going to be 5 years. Signing it up into a buffer, the farmer establishes the buffer because it's harvestable, and we didn't want to tell the farmers you can only plant this in the harvestable buffer. It's really up to them and what they want to do as far as the seed mix and the forage part of it. We just look at making sure that there's at least 50% grasses that are in the buffer, and then whatever else is in the 50% can be the forage side of it. And it affords the farmer a nice option where if they really like to maintain the buffer, they can go in and clip it periodically and do some maintenance on it that isn't ordinarily available through the CREP program. But those two programs are really great options for farmers to establish those buffers. CREP is a little bit longer with the 15 years, and ours is a little bit shorter with the 5-year option. But two great programs to establish and maintain buffers. So that's the program side of it. So if anybody's interested in either CREP or the county program, by all means see the Land Conservation Department staff.
I think part of it is kind of going down the path of where you got started. You know, part of it, you were going down the soil health path. You were trying to kind of explore how you continued to kind of push that path forward. But I'm always interested to kind of hear, is there challenges that you went through? You know, obviously we're seeing a tiled field here next to us, Dave. I'm just kind of interested, what what drove you kind of down the path of tile here? What were you hoping to kind of get out, and how did you kind of prepare this field, I guess, to kind of go back into your no-till? Because obviously the tiling was kind of a disturbance, right, through this last year. So I'm kind of just get your feedback on what we see behind us.
Well, we planted a rye cover in here at 20 pounds because when we combine the wheat, there's always some wheat goes back and grows, and it looks like a lot of wheat. It's really not, but it just grew so well this year. Plus, we put the low disturbance manure on, which in turn, manure really grabs the nutrients and makes it grow faster also. We used to do cover crops when we first started was for erosion control. Because when we would do these tile fields, we'd come out with our chisel plows and we would rip everything up. And in spring, we'd come back and wherever the tiles were was nice loose ground, and would wash them all out. If you want to go look at a perfect picture, go to Country Visions. It's on the wall right when you come in. You can see to the inch where we had cover crops and where we didn't. And now we're starting to see, as we're going longer, the benefits of the cover crops are doing more than just erosion. They're supporting the microbes. They're supporting beneficial insects. There's a lot of good that is coming from this program that we're trying to get moving. I guess the start was, if you look at the covers back here, they were the first ones that we planted before the rains came. Rain is very important for a farmer for growing corn, soybeans, wheat, but it's also important for growing cover crops. It's no different than when we go out in the field in the spring and we want to get our corn planted because the earliest corn usually is the best corn we have. I'm starting to see that with cover crops. If we can get them established and we can get them growing, you see more benefit because they're gathering nutrients. When we put this low disturbance manure down, those nutrients are immediately being converted to something the plant can use. I don't know, do you guys have any questions on?
Well, I think this year was kind of one of those years with it being so dry. When farmers wanted to go out and work on a problem area in the field, they actually could do it this year because you had the soil conditions to be able to do it. Too often, I think you see a lot of farmers trying to fix problems out in their field, but if you didn't have the right soil moisture, they made those problems worse. And so that's why I was just kind of curious to see kind of, as you go through this process, what are you looking for so that you're not setting yourself back or, taking a step back because you're overlooking something?
Well, we tried to keep the tracks as narrow as we could. We didn't come and till the field. We kind of did something I don't like to do. We waited a week, and then we kind of came and drove the track shut because it's almost impossible to get out of this field without bouncing over everything. It's turning out pretty decent. I think we have enough erosion control here that it'll keep it from washing.
Dave, can you just talk a little bit about your equipment and just give specifics for folks that are looking to do this on what you have on your farm to help achieve your cover crops, and maybe even give like some of the dates of establishment for this, if you have it?
Sure. We it's more or less a no-till drill. You can use a 750 or any kind of no-till drill. We just recently changed to an air seeder. The reason air seeder works so good for us is because you can put a lot more seed in there. When you went with a normal 8-grain drill, you only had about an hour and somebody was there trying to fill you up with seed. The biggest thing is when we combined this field, we took the weed off. Immediately, Chad was here putting on a low disturbance manure. We went up to 12,000 gallons. We tried some on 2 applications, and we tried some with 1 application for the simple fact to just see how much pooling it was and what our cover crop was doing. We did not harvest a straw. When I went through and combined the wheat, we blew the straw back, which was another important factor. It seems to really absorb anything that's coming out of the low disturbance manure. We went, like I said, we started combining wheat on the 19th to the 31st. The low disturbance manure came, I want to say, around the 20th. And we started, after that, then we had to do some of the tracks and stuff with a vertical till to kind of level some of the spots. Then we came back and we planted the covers, and the first covers we planted on was August 7th. So that was quite a window. It would have been nicer if we could have got going right after wheat, but it just didn't work out. We needed to get everything in line. We ended up planting 6 pounds of crimson clover, 6 pounds of berseem clover, 4 pounds of red clover, 2 pounds of rapeseed, 2 pounds of radishes, 2 pounds of turnips, and this year I tried something called sun hemp. It's the taller stuff growing. It kind of looks like a water hemp plant, but not as high powered. If we come over here, you can look. It was the first covers we planted. You go further up the field, you can see we were 2 weeks behind. We had 3 inches of rain on these cover crops, and we've maybe had an inch since on the second batch of cover crops. You'll be able to see the difference of what planting date and what rain really does. We should probably take a walk and look. You guys are going to be amazed.
All right, so we're going to just take a walk up and take a look at the cover crops up farther in the field.
I think that's the sun hemp, yeah. This is berseem clover, if nobody's ever seen it. Where this is flowering, I don't know, Kevin and Jeff, we know we were trying to put a number on it last year of how much we should take from this plant for nitrogen. We won't know for another month, maybe, once we take the corn off. We tried 30 pounds. Correct. But this is what you want to see. You want to see the flowers. But you can see this is a turnip. It's purple. The radishes already are. Oh, where did that one go? Right here we have a radish. But we really took it down. Last year we were so heavy. We were like 4 pounds on radishes, and it just kind of took everything over. If I was going to say. But the crimson clover, you can see they're smaller, and then you can see the red clovers are in here too. Here's a rape.
Have you done the berseem before, Dave?
Yes, last year.
Did it overwinter for you?
No, it did not. That is the first to die. Once it's like oats or something, it's just completely gone. But it was the rapeseed made it through this year, and we had actually killed some off this spring. We sprayed everything off, and I don't know if there were some hard seeds yet, but I know in some of the cornfields I can see some radishes and different things are coming now. This was planted on August 7th, and we had like almost 3 inches of rain, I would say, on this. We got chased out of the field with a ½ inch when we were planting. You can kind of see it. Now just look behind us. That was planted on the 21st. Look how the wheat grabbed that, what would you say, 1/10 of rain that we had from a low disturbance manure?
Was that plant the same time as this?
Yeah. Then even like the field when you come down the lane, that one was after the rains too. We put alfalfa in there in the same mix, but you can't even see. And then this is his blind planted. This was all planted into the same mix that's there, but look how it. That's the best. You can see they're here. They didn't get enough sunlight. They didn't get enough rain. The other thing too is if you take a little step here, you talk about this. You don't see the weeds growing in that as bad as you do in this area. It just got a little more time. It had more competition. The wheat didn't get ahead of it. You see a lot less of it there. Because we had the other covers there that came in with the wheat. And really, just like the wheat, some of these weeds help suppress a lot of the covers that are planted in here. But the opposite was over there where you had the covers planted on the land.
So next spring then, Dave, what is your plan before planting here?
We usually come in and terminate the cover after we plant. I think when we start next year, we're going to probably come in. We made a machine last year called we call it a strip freshener. We'll go through and we'll move some of this residue aside when it's still kind of dormant, and then we'll come and plant green, and then usually we spray off. Usually, depending on when the rain's going to come, we try and get it off so that we can get it sprayed before the corn sprouts. Some fields we have to do sooner. Like before when we were standing here, some of this weed is getting kind of out of hand. We might have to clip that off next year just so we have a seed bed. But maybe this will be our experiment. We'll do a strip where we did and where we didn't. Okay. But it just makes it kind of a pain because then you have to come back twice. Yeah. For a little strip, when you can go and burn it off and everything's the same way. Right.
Yeah. Consistency. Yeah, that's
correct.
Well, here you can have a little bit different, right? Like you got a lot more wheat here versus.
Yeah, and this is going to get planted this way, so we will be able to see the difference. Yeah. Because I won't be able to take the 30 units of N like we'd have here. So maybe it'll be a good spot. Maybe we'll see on a yield map if it did anything. But this is not going to let the soil go.
Yeah. What do you got there, Derek?
You can see the difference in nodulation between the two growth. Not a whole lot. That was out of this section. Not a whole lot there.
Right?
When you pull up the one that's been there for a while, you got this. It's quite a bit more. It's got a big cluster of them on there.
Oh, I see.
So you can see. If you guys don't know what nodulation, it's this little white. They're usually attached to the roots. It depends on the clover species. This is berseem, so it grows more along the stalk, the taproot. Or sometimes you'll get the other species that have more fine roots, and it'll grow along those. But you can just see in the later planting date, there's not much going on there. Now, if we get cold or frost, that one's not going to produce a whole lot. So, end fixation is one of your goals. Early planting is critical to that. And manure will affect the amount of development too, because there's a lot of nitrogen in manure, so that sometimes makes the clovers lazy. They won't produce as much. Everybody wants to let it.
Not going to be down in the root zone to be used next year, or will it be the following year? Is a big thing. I think if you follow what's Calmer's name? Marion Calmer Cornheads. He's been no-tilling for years, and he's doing studies on stratification. That the surface is so much higher, but how long does it take for these nutrients to get back down into the root zone without tillage? And I think that's part of the problem. I shouldn't say problem. It's one of the things we've got to figure out. I'm Bruce Peterson. I'm president of the new Fond du Lac County Watersheds Alliance. We got started. Our first come together meeting at all was last February. We've got thanks to Tom Bartle here and Rick Fox. Town of Calumet's got our runoff reduction committee because of this whole slope to the lakeshore. The lakeshore residents wanted to see what we could do, and they pushed to get a watershed group, farmers-led watershed group going, and helped us get going good. We started the plans were for the west side of the town. We had to include the east side of the town. We got Chad and Dave involved in there, and many other in the Sheboygan and Manitowoc watersheds. And Dave Schultz was out to these meetings, and Dale Thiel, and we decided just to go and make it a county-wide group. Leadership is always tough to find, so the bigger area we can cover, the more chance we got for future leaders and keep this thing going for a long, long time. I'm president, Dave's vice president, Chad's our treasurer, Lorna Buck is pseudo secretary. She wants out as quickly as she can, and Ambrose Lizaway is on our board, our farmer board. Paul, Tom, and Rick are advisory members of our board. So we're hoping to have a kickoff this winter sometime and get as many farmers from around the county as we can involved.
Talk about your grant that you
We've applied for the Department of Agriculture Farmer-Led Watershed Group grant. We applied for 40,000 there, and we applied for 40,000 or 10,000 from the Nature Conservancy. We'll see what we get, and go on. Those are 50% matching grants, so we need to come up with our money as the cover crop practices and no-till. They consider if you plant twice as much as what they cost share, that's your 50%. So if you get share on 20 acres, you got to plant 40. So we went 1.5 times your cost share. So you'd have to plant 30 acres for 20 acres, and you get cost shared. That way we knew we were going to have enough to get our 50% matching.
I'll just add to that a little bit. I'm so excited for the Fond du Lac County Watersheds Alliance to get started. It really complements a lot of the programming that the Land Conservation Department is currently working on. So as far as how do you get started with some of this, the Land Conservation Department has what we call soil health funding. So each year, Fond du Lac County gets an allocation of cost share funding from Fond du Lac County. I take out a portion of that funding that we get and I earmark it simply just for soil health practices. So a few years ago, Fond du Lac County Land Conservation Department developed a soil health program where we can cost share up to $2,000 for farmers to try some of the soil health practices that normally people can't get funding for. Like I said, some of these practices are really innovative, and the larger funding sources that we normally use really haven't quite come around to offering cost sharing for them. So that's kind of the niche that we fill, is we offer small amounts of it in any ways where farmers can try some of this, like the cover crops, which isn't too new or innovative necessarily anymore, but it helps kind of get you started with how to consistently do it. But we've got folks that are trying wide rows, interseeding, things like that. We've cost shared some of the harvestable buffers through that. So it's a great program. But the thing that's helpful with the farmer-led group is that it's the farmers that are kind of determining what practices that they want to cost share. So our program was really started out with some of the things that we heard from farmers that they would really like to try, but there's no funding. So we developed a program with some practices to do that. The struggle with that is that it's still our program, and we're just kind of cost sharing practices that we think farmers are going to want to do. And the nice thing about the Watersheds Alliance group is that it's farmers sitting around the table talking about conservation practices that they would like to see or do on their farm. So it's really definitely very complementary. We also have been applying for funding from the Department of Ag, which is the same funding that the Watersheds Alliance is looking to get. Only it's coming to Land Conservation Departments, and it's called Innovation Grant Funding from the Department of Ag. And we've been successful for the last couple of years receiving that. It's a maximum of $50,000 per county per year. And we've been successful with almost maxing out every year that we've applied for that. And that's simply because of the interest that the farmers have shown towards doing some of these practices. So that way that one works is that farmers can submit an application for what they would like to do. And again, this is the great part about it, is they're telling us what they would like to do. They submit an application with their funding. Typically, it's a maximum of $15,000 per farmer. And with those applications, we'll rank them based on the soil health principles that we're trying to achieve throughout the county. And then after we've ranked them, we'll determine which and how much funding each farmer can get from their application. So it's really a great opportunity that was developed out of looking at a SARE grant. That's the way that program works. So we developed a program that kind of mirrored that, and I'm really liking how that's worked out so far. So we do have definitely, I'm really excited about the funding that the Watersheds Alliance is getting. but even still, if there's farmers out there that are interested in funding and one source doesn't have it, we're hoping we can coordinate and try and get the farmers some funding that they're looking for between either the county, state funding sources, federal funding sources. Derek's here from NRCS, so they have EQIP funding that can help farmers do a lot of the same things. So federal, state, local, and even more local with the Watersheds Alliance funding. There's definitely funding out there for farmers to try some of this stuff and get their boots on the ground. And now certainly we have other farmers that are helping to support other farmers, which is great.
Paul talks about the innovative ideas. On our watershed grant application, we put in for a demonstration project expanding on what was done on the Pipe Creek. They come in with a forestry shredder and trimmed out all the small brush along the waterway before they started taking bigger trees down than they needed to. We put in to clean up 4 days work along the waterways on 4 different farms to clear that back so we can get some grass growing in there. What the DNR asked 60 years ago was to quit pasturing the cows. Well, it's all grown up with brush, and we don't have any grass down in the woods anymore. We've got to clear that grass away so we get grass, or the brush away so we get grass growing along the stream banks so that when it does flood, we can hold the ground there. And that's just one of our demonstration things. We hope that it works well.
One last little bit that I'd at least like to for sure hit on is I just want to thank the farmers that have been participating, like Chad and Dave, in this project. It was a great opportunity for us to learn more about their farm. I think importantly, it was a way for their farms to communicate to the greater public the practices that they're trying and that they care about land and water and the stewardship of their farms. And I think it was a great opportunity to showcase that. Chad and Dave and other farmers that we've worked with, I can't thank them enough for just kind of opening up their farm and talking with us and demonstrating not only to us but to you, more importantly. But it's been a great working relationship with the farmers that have been participating with this, and that's kind of what I dream that we're here to do as land conservation departments, is to support farmers doing these kinds of practices. So I can't thank them enough for the effort and the opportunity to be able to work with them and learn from them as well.